Welcome into Morning JOX here. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell here with you for the next hour as we get you set up for what will hopefully be a wonderful Friday for each and every one of you as we have made it almost to yet another weekend here. A short week for many of us after the Memorial Day holiday, but here we are on a Friday. Hope everyone has some big plans for the weekend. If you weren't able to get down to the beach or to the lake last weekend, maybe that's what you're going to be doing this weekend. Maybe you're going to be going down to Destin and seeing if you can pick up any rumblings from the SEC spring meetings. Anybody that's lingering around that may have some thoughts on the future of college football and the playoff and how many games we should play in the SEC schedule here. So a lot going on. And we just want to get you set up for the weekend and continue to kind of just dive into everything that happened this week down in Destin with the SEC spring meetings. And I would argue maybe maybe not eventful in the sense of things that are happening, but in the sense of the conversations and kind of moving in the right direction in a lot of these conversations. I would say this has been one of the more entertaining or more interesting SEC spring meetings in a while, just in terms of, they've got some, a lot of big issues that they've been discussing. And we've heard a lot of different opinions from a lot of different coaches, a lot of different athletic directors, from Commissioner Sankey himself. And so it's just kind of fascinating to go through all of that. We had some more of this yesterday. There was this pamphlet that the media was handed out apparently down there in Destin where the SEC did the liberty of,
they said, check the tape.
They said essentially, so if you want to know why we are upset with the playoff system and the way that the college football playoff has been handled, particularly in terms of strength of schedule and how that has been weighted or really the lack thereof, it being weighted and that hurting the SEC, they made sure to give everybody some data and let them know, hey, this is the toughest conference in the country, and we're going to show you why right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll be honest, I just never seen something like that before. I was like, man, we're taking this to a different level.
Yeah, we pulling out the big guns. Like when Greg Sankey pulls out the briefcase and shows you numbers, you can't deny it. And then you look at, and of course we'll talk about it, but like when you look at like the ACC, they're like, ooh, you down at the bottom, big dog. Oh, okay, so. Really and truly, outside of Florida State for a year, Clemson has been carrying this entire conference on his back for a long time.
Yeah, so we'll get into that here coming up in a little bit. We have some I know Pat Smith's going to be happy because it just got a lot more expensive if you want to storm the field as well. So we'll tell you about that. So some things are actually happening down there in Destin. It's just maybe not the big answers that we want in terms of college football playoff and 8 or 9 game conference schedule for college football. But some interesting things still going on there yesterday. But of course, on top of that, you still had a doubleheader for the Braves yesterday. Some very exciting news and some very potentially devastating news all in one there yesterday for the Braves. So we'll tell you what's going on there. You've got the Stallions. They're going to be on the road this weekend, wrapping up the regular season, looking for a little bit of revenge against the Memphis Showboats as well. So a lot of things to get to. And, of course, we have our next edition of Mount Rushmore. So we're going to have to figure out what we want to do next week. But for today, we are going to, I think, kind of put a bow on the SEC portion of this. And we are going to do our Mount Rushmore for SEC head football coaches. So that's something that a number of you had asked us to do. And as we went through each program, a lot of people, a lot of y'all threw in coaches into your own Mount Rushmore. But we just stuck with the players for ours. So now we're going to go and take a crack at who we think the 4 greatest football coaches are in the history of the SEC. I think we all know at least one that's going to be on everybody's list, or they should be. And if not, you're just a hater. But other than that, we'll see where that list ends up ultimately going. But you can send those in 205-834-9450. Of course, our boy Lewis already. 5:57 this morning, Lewis. That's what I'm talking about, baby. So if you want to be like Lewis and chime in with your favorite or who you think the greatest SEC college football coaches are, you can certainly do that on the text line. But all right, let's get to what I talked about, alluded to at the beginning of the show, and that was this media docket that was handed out to some of the members of the media down there in Destin covering the spring meetings for the SEC. So Ross Dellinger for Yahoo was all over this. Brett McMurphy from the Action Network, he was actually kind enough to post screenshots of this document that was handed out. So according to Brett McMurphy, he posted this on social media yesterday afternoon. It says the SEC provided a 7-page document to media showing the, quote, regular season gauntlet that SEC teams face in league play. It says the SEC, quote, no other conference has a regular season as grueling as the SEC's. Granted, I think we all know that, right? We've talked about that for a while here. But this is where what Damian was talking about earlier, where it got a little ugly for some of these teams. Let's just be honest. Okay, so I'm going to try to describe this for you. And again, if you want to go on social media, at Brett_McMurphy, you can go and see it there. He posted the photos of it. But for those of you listening, it's a chart, and there's a line in the middle, and essentially that is the line of strength of record. And so the way that the SEC has this broken down is schools in each conference that would be in the top 50 of strength of record and those that would be outside of the top 50. So essentially, how many college football programs in your conference would we view as a top 50 team in college football? All right, and this is an average over the last decade. So you have the SEC. We have 16 teams in our conference. 14 of them are in the top 50. 2 of them are not. Think we can assume one of them is Vanderbilt? Kentucky or Mississippi State. Yeah. It's one of those two. But Vanderbilt and then one of those two. I think it's safe to assume those would be the two. So 14 of the SEC's 16 teams would be ranked in the top 50 in terms of strength of record, so most difficult college football programs to play. The Big Ten would have 10 inside the top 50. That's pretty good, double digits. But that also means they have 8 that are below 50 because they have 18 teams in their conference. So they would be so the SEC, just for comparison's sake, 13% of the SEC is ranked outside of the top 50. 44% of the Big Ten is ranked outside of the top 50. Then it gets really ugly. You go look at the Big Ten or the Big 12. 9 of their 16 teams would be on the outside looking in. So they have 9 teams in their conference that are ranked 50th or lower in strength of record. And then the ACC. 11 of their 16 schools are ranked outside of the top 50. So for the Big 12, it's 56%, and the ACC, 65% of their conference outside of the top 50. So essentially, they're telling you the ACC, 2/3 of the ACC really isn't even worthwhile competition in college football over the last decade. The Big 12, a little over half. The Big 10, 44%, so a little under half. Really not a big factor in the grand scheme of, being competitive at a high level in college football. The SEC is 13%. 14 of our 16 programs here in the SEC are ranked inside the top 50. The Big Ten has 8. So when you hear Greg Sankey saying things like, well, why are we the ones making compromises anymore? Why don't some of these other conferences start making compromises if they're not happy with the way things work? Oh, the Big Ten, they're not okay with a 5-11 playoff model unless the SEC goes to 9 conference games as well. This is why Greg Sankey doesn't want to budge and hasn't budged in a while. I mean, it speaks for itself, Damian. Like, it is what it is, and we know, and again, we all know, right? At the top level with the SEC and the Big Ten, pretty comparable in a lot of ways, right? The Big Ten's won the last 2 national championships. I don't think anyone here is debating that Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon or any of those teams are not worthy of being in the same conversation as the Alabamas, Georgias, Texases of the world, right? But it's that bottom part of the conference, and that's where people kind of get lost with the SEC. Is the SEC, the middle of the conference is so brutally difficult that's why you have Kentucky beating Ole Miss and Vanderbilt and Oklahoma beating Alabama and things like that. Whereas in the Big Ten, you just don't see those kinds of upsets as often because they have some really, really bad teams in the Big Ten.
Yep. And that's kind of where I've been the past couple of days. It's all right, you look at what the SEC has to go through week to week, and the numbers show exactly what you mean. And when we separate, and Greg does a good job, and he talks about the middle of the pack of the SEC. It's almost rotating year by year because the teams that are in that middle tier of the SEC, if you put them in the Big Ten, they would be looked at as one of the better teams in that conference. You look at the same way at the ACC and the Big 12. The SEC regular season is one that it separates itself because, like you said, you look at the Kentuckys, how they can go toe-to-toe with Georgia on a consistent basis when they knocked off Ole Miss, who was a top 10 team last year. And we've seen years where, throw the Iron Bowl in there when there have been Auburn teams that come in, 6-5, 7-6, whatever, and they knock off an Alabama that's ranked in the top 5. Like when we look at the middle pack of the SEC, and even sometimes at the bottom, these teams are competitive. Like you look at their records, you see when Oklahoma comes in and they go 6-7 their first year, but yet they have wins over, Alabama and Auburn and things like that. It's on a consistent basis, and Greg Sankey has done it. Like Greg Sankey, when we discuss him, he doesn't have to look out for the entire landscape of college football. He has to look out for the SEC, and when he has numbers like this of trying to explain to people, no, we have the best conference. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. When they go week to week, of course everybody would love a 9-game conference schedule, but really and truly the 8 is showing you that it doesn't even matter what the record is. It doesn't really matter. The teams that we have accumulated here in the SEC, they are better than a lot of other programs around these other conferences, and the strength of record speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I just go and okay, let's look at quickly just what you had in the SEC last year, right? And you go and look at the bottom part of the conference. All right, Mississippi State, they had a bad year. Not a whole lot to talk about there. But Kentucky beat Ole Miss, almost beat Georgia. Auburn beat Texas A&M. Oklahoma beat Alabama. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Arkansas beat Tennessee. Florida beat Ole Miss. Like, again, these are the teams that we're looking at as, those were the bad teams in the conference last year. And every single one of them, except for Mississippi State, had a marquee win over a team that was in college football playoff consideration, or in Auburn's sake, a Texas A&M team that we thought was going to be playing in Atlanta. And so it just goes to show you that middle part of the conference, like we were talking about, like Damien's talking about there, that is where, a lot of the lifeblood is of the SEC. And you go and you look at the Big Ten, and like Purdue didn't do anything last year. Maryland didn't do anything. Northwestern didn't upset anybody. Wisconsin didn't upset anybody. Now, maybe that's because Alabama, took out their quarterback's knees in the first game of the season, or, the third game of the season. But it is so incomparable when you look at the bottom half, or the middle, whatever part you want to call it, of the SEC versus the Big Ten and all these other conferences. It is truly incomparable, right? Like I'll give it to you. Every year in the SEC, there might be 2 programs, like we saw in the data, that kind of stink it up. Fair. But in all these other conferences, you have 7, 8, 9, 10 teams that are stinking it up. And it dilutes the overall product of the conference. And I understand people are tired of the SEC bias, and people are so ready for the SEC to go away. But it's not going anywhere. And we all realize this for what it is. And you can call us SEC homers. Well, we are SEC homers because we do a radio show in Birmingham, Alabama. And we also recognize that we have the best product in college football. So that's just a little bit of what was going on there at spring meetings yesterday. Just kind of interesting how they had they just had this ready for the media and saying, hey, all right, we've been getting some backlash this week. Some people are taking shots at the SEC. This is why we feel the way that we do, and do with that what you will. So the other thing that was interesting that came out of Destin yesterday, real quick, was about storming the field. I know I mentioned that at the top of the show, but they have now changed the ruling. So it used to be escalating. So it would start at 100,000, then it would go up to 250, I believe. And so for each subsequent offense, it would be raised the amount of money that you would be fined, and then it would stop at 500,000. That was the cap. That's not happening anymore. Straight up $500,000. We're going to the max. If you storm the field anymore, you're going to have to pay $500,000. So It's crazy to think that this probably affects Vanderbilt more than anybody else, at least based on the last 12 months. But that's, I know, a change that'll make a lot of people happy, and maybe we will see a little bit less of it now because we still got it last year. So maybe this will fix it. But we'll see.
Let's not forget there's a team here in the state of Alabama that's stormed the field as well after beating Texas A&M.
Yep, that's true. It's going to be $500,000 this year.
just be let's be smart, guys.
Yes.
Let's be smart.
Absolutely. So that's what was going on down there in Destin. But yeah, if you have any thoughts, any questions, whatever concerns about the college football playoff, the future of that, what that's going to look like, hey, maybe if you think the SEC is being a bunch of big babies, let us know. 205-834-9450. Would love to hear from you. You can also send in your SEC head coaches, Mount Rushmore, as we will get to those a little bit later in the show. But going to take a quick break, come back on the other side here, tell you what happened yesterday as the Braves had a big doubleheader, chance to gain some ground in the NL East. We'll tell you everything that happened on there and get you ready as the Stallions giddy on up over to Memphis for a little revenge this weekend. You're listening to Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5. Well, Sunday at 2 o'clock, the Birmingham Stallions will put a cap on their 2025 regular season as they will head up to Memphis, take on the Showboats. They're going to get a little revenge from earlier in the season. If you remember back in week 5, you had the Stallions and the Showboats doing battle here in Protective Stadium, and Memphis pulled out the 24-20 win in overtime after Birmingham had come back. Kind of tied it in dramatic fashion. They're late in regulation. Then it goes to overtime. You're thinking, all right, this is going to set up nicely for the Stallions. There's no way you're actually going to lose to the Showboats because they're terrible. Let's just be honest. And ultimately, the Stallions come up short. At that point in time, they were 3-2 on the season. I think a lot of us, Damian, at that point, probably not super optimistic about how this season was going to turn out for the Stallions. But now things have cleared up a little bit. Still got some things to work on, but obviously playing significantly better football now. And this is a much different Stallions team that we're going to see in Memphis this weekend than we saw the first time these two teams faced off.
Yeah, and our quarterback's healthy. We have Jamar Smith, and ever since he's been inserted into the offense has looked better. They've scored a lot more points. The biggest thing for the Stallions, man, defensively, it's at some point the defensive line has to generate some sort of pass rush. They got to find some consistency. And, I mean, I just go back to the Michigan Panther game, and, I mean, it felt like Michigan could do no wrong in the run game. Like, they ran up and down the field on us. But we still came out with a victory, and that's all that matters. But I think for this game against Memphis, everybody's kind of in that mode of, okay, do we rest players? I think for Birmingham, because we've had so much inconsistency, you kind of have to, like, you got to let everything go. You have to just, play like it is a playoff game, essentially. Like, I don't think that you need to take your foot off the pedal because, yeah, this Memphis team, they're not good. They haven't been, but they do have a win against you already.
Yep.
So I think the revenge factor in that situation, you got to have these guys locked in. And also, the best thing for us is just building momentum up until the Michigan playoff game. And I think what we did last week kind of put ourselves in a good position. Michigan may have been without Bryce Perkins. It shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I think that for Birmingham, going up there to Memphis, handling your business, and treat it like a playoff game. I think Skip Holtz, you don't have to – I think he has such a read on the team that he doesn't necessarily have to go out there and give them a rah-rah. It's – no, you know exactly what's at stake once this game is over. So let's treat this one like essentially the first round of the playoffs or something like that. And I think that for Birmingham, they go in there with that mindset. We should handle our business against Memphis this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely don't think this is a game you take your foot off the gas. You have the extra motivation because you lost him earlier in the year. But like you said, it's all about building momentum for next weekend when they will host Michigan here at Protective Stadium. In the first round of the playoffs, the winner will advance to the UFL championship game. So a big game coming up next weekend. But first, got to take care of Memphis on Sunday. That's going to be a 2 p.m. kickoff on Sunday afternoon. And just a quick reminder, if anybody is going out there to Memphis, you can go find the Horsemen on Facebook, and they have a link where you can all sit together and be there with the Birmingham Stallions fans in Memphis. All right, now let's go to the Diamond real quick because you had a big doubleheader yesterday for the Atlanta Braves. So you had a rain out on Wednesday, so they moved the first game up to early yesterday. So you had a little bit of lunchtime baseball, and then you had the night game as well. And one game went pretty well for the Braves, one game not so much. And so we'll start with the first game. Didn't go as you would hope if you're an Atlanta Braves fan. It was an exciting game, but Philadelphia ends up getting out of there with a 5-4 victory. Batter got hit with the bases loaded in the bottom of the 8th inning, and that scored the go-ahead run for the Phillies. So not the way that you want to give up the lead if you're the Braves, and certainly not the worst pitching news that you got of the day, but certainly not good news. But Acuna, he did have an RBI single. You had Sean Murphy. He hit another home run there as well. Michael Harris with an RBI double to make it 4-4 there in the 8th inning as the Braves scored 2 runs. And then you have the hit by pitch in the bottom of the 8th. Phillies score to go up 5-4, and that was all that she wrote. But the big takeaway from this game, and I truly do feel really, really bad for Braves fans right now. But A.J. Smith-Shawver, who was trending to probably being the rookie of the year in the National League, he had a right now he has a 3.86 ERA after yesterday. He went 2 2/3 innings, gave up 2 earned runs, 3 hits, struck out 1 batter. He did get hit in the leg by a line drive off one of the bats of a Phillies hitter. But then his elbow popped, and we don't know for certain yet, but the assumption is it's the UCL, and we all know that means that it's either going to be Tommy John's or it's going to be the kind of brace procedure that's not as invasive as Tommy John's. That's what Spencer Strider had. That's also what Garrett Cole is undergoing for the Yankees right now, or he underwent that, and he's now recovering from it. So, yeah, A.J. Smith-Shawver most likely out for the year. That's going to be the expectation. Just another brutal hit for the Braves. You had Strider go down. You've had Acuna out, and they're finally back and looking like they're starting to get healthy. And now you're promising rookie pitcher. He finds himself probably out for the rest of the season. So a big blow there yesterday for the Atlanta Braves in the first game of the doubleheader. But there was a little bit of good news to come after that, because you did win the second game of the doubleheader. 9-3 was the final score last night. So the bats finally woke up for the Atlanta Braves. Chris Sale, masterful last night. 6 innings pitched, shutout. 6 shutout innings, only gave up 2 hits, 8 strikeouts, and along the way, he got his 2500th career strikeout. That's kind of a weird one to say. But he becomes the fastest pitcher to hit 2,500 career strikeouts in Major League Baseball, doing so in 2,026 innings, which is almost, that's 81 innings faster than Randy Johnson, who is the next fastest. Now, caveat, Chris Sale has been injured a lot. He's had some problems, so he's up there a little bit in age, but still, it just goes to show how special he is when he has been healthy in his career. And unfortunately, I enjoyed it because he wasn't very good in Boston, but he had a few years of his career where he was just, constantly dealing with injuries and now having a resurgence here with the Braves the last couple of years. So good for Chris Sale. Awesome accomplishment. He joins Clayton Kershaw, Justin Verlander, and Max Scherzer as the only other active pitchers to hit that milestone. So a big day there for Chris Sale yesterday, as the Braves pick up a win 9-3 over the Philadelphia Phillies. You had Austin Riley with an RBI double. Albies hit a home run. Austin Riley ended up hitting a home run to go along with his double there in the top of the 7th. The Braves were up 8-0 at one point, and ended up winning that one 9-3. So if you're keeping tabs at home, Braves now 26-29 on the season. Not quite where you want to be, Damian. Not as good as your Cincinnati Reds at 28-29.
Hey,
they only wish.
Yeah, we're getting there.
You're getting there. But Atlanta, they are now 9.5 games back of Philadelphia, 7.5 games back of the New York Mets. But let's look at the wild card, right?
It's a long season.
Let's be honest. You're fighting for a wild card spot at this point. Right now, Braves 5.5 games back of a wild card spot.
See, it's reasonable.
That you can stomach. 9.5, that's a little scary. 5.5,
it's reasonable.
We can play with that. So Atlanta 26-29 on the season, 5.5 games back in the wild card, 9.5 back in the National League East, and now you get to play a familiar opponent because you played them not very long ago. But the Boston Red Sox are next on the docket for the Atlanta Braves, and that game will be tonight. a 6:15 first pitch there at home against Boston. You'll be able to hear that on the JOX family of networks. It also looks like that will be on Apple TV. And it looks like you're going to have a doubleheader on Apple TV tonight because I know the Yankees and Dodgers play. That's going to be a big series this weekend. Then you'll have Atlanta and the Red Sox before that. So that's what's going on with the Atlanta Braves. Some bad news yesterday with A.J. Smith-Shawver, but Chris Sale hitting his 25th, 100th career strikeout, joining some rarefied air there yesterday for the Atlanta Braves. So that kind of gets you up to date on everything you may have missed from yesterday. So now we move forward with our Mount Rushmore for SEC head football coaches. So this is one we've been waiting to do for some time now. We already have some suggestions. Maybe we should do mascots on Monday. Maybe that's something we could do, Damon. We could do our favorite SEC mascots. We'll see. We'll ponder that one a little bit, but we're going to take a break, come back. Me and Damien are going to share our Mount Rushmores for the best SEC head football coaches of all time, and then we will get to your list as well at 205-834-9450. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5. $6:35. Welcome back in. Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5. Conrad and Damien here with you until 7 o'clock when we hand you off to McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Appreciate you spending part of your Friday morning here with us as we try to get you started into your weekend with a little bit of a fun conversation. So we've been having a lot of fun with this the last few weeks, doing our Mount Rushmores for all of the different SEC schools. And yesterday we did just our overall best SEC players of all time. That one had a lot of debate going along with it, as you would expect. And now, wouldn't expect it to be any different today, Damien, because we are going to do our Mount Rushmore of SEC head football coaches. And just based on skimming the text line, already a lot of different names being thrown out here, a lot of variation in some of these lists. But as you would expect, a couple of names, two in particular, that are very common themes here. So we will get to those. I will share mine, Damien will share his, and then we will get to yours at 205-834-9450 if you still want to send yours in. So quickly, honorable mentions. I have 3 of them. So first off, I have Pat Dye, best coach in Auburn football history, won multiple SEC championships, 3-time SEC Coach of the Year. What he did at Auburn, the greatest coach in Auburn football history. He's a legend, and obviously had to give him an honorable mention. I also threw Urban Meyer on there. And I know some people will probably have him on their Mount Rushmore. For me, it was based on more so the fact he had a lot of success, won 2 national titles at Florida, but he was only there for 6 seasons. And I'll be completely honest, like me and Damien were talking, it's like I don't think about it. And I'm just like, oh, Urban Meyer was there for a decade. And then you realize, no, he really wasn't. He was not there for very long. So I have Urban Meyer as an honorable mention. And the last one, I was debating between 2 guys here, and you'll understand when I give you my list, but I have Kirby Smart as my last honorable mention. Couple more years, and I think he would certainly be up there, but for right now, I did have one person ahead of him. So for my SEC coaches, Mount Rushmore, at the very top, the greatest college football coach of all time, arguably the greatest coach ever to do it. Whether you love him or hate him, it's Nick Saban. You can't have a Mount Rushmore of anything involving college football coaches and not have Coach Saban.
Correct.
On there, and in my opinion, at the very tip top. So Nick Saban, he's up there at the top. Also, of course, Bear Bryant. Got to have Bear Bryant on there as well. So Nick Saban, Bear Bryant. I went the old ball coach Steve Spurrier, and a lot of that has to do, obviously, we all remember what he did at Florida, winning a national championship, all the success he had there, not only as a player, but then as a coach, obviously. But I feel like, and maybe we do and we just don't talk about it enough, but I don't know if he gets enough credit now for what he did at South Carolina and getting them to an SEC championship game and just kind of turning that program around for a little while and the success that he did have there. He didn't win a title or anything, but still did a great job at South Carolina. So I have Steve Spurrier. And then lastly, this is where it was tough between Kirby and this guy, but I went with Vince Dooley. And the reason I went with Vince Dooley over Kirby is just the longevity of how long he was there. I mean, he was the head coach at Georgia for 25 seasons. That's a very long time. He does only have 1 title. I know Kirby has 2. But he won 6 SEC titles there, and just the longevity of what he did, 5-time SEC Coach of the Year, over 200 career wins at Georgia. If you have Kirby ahead of him, I have no complaints about that. But for the longevity and the history of what he did for Georgia, I went Vince Dooley. So my Mount Rushmore, Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, and Vince Dooley. Damien, where did you go with your Mount Rushmore?
I'm very similar with yours. Honorable mention, first I have Urban Meyer. Also have Philip Fulmer, Tennessee head coach there as well. And I have Vince Dooley in my honorable mention. So essentially I did the opposite thing that you did. So
Yeah.
my Mount Rushmore goes pretty much exactly like yours. I have Nick Saban at number one. It speaks for itself. The resume speaks for itself, what he's been able to do in college football. Number two, I have Bear Bryant. And again, you just look at the resume and it's like, yep, he's definitely on there. Number three for me, I also have Steve Spurrier. Like you said, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he was able to do with South Carolina. Everybody knows what he was doing at Florida. I mean, he changed the game and really put Florida on the map. But I think his success at South Carolina as well, keeping them relevant. Like, not even, again, I mean, you look at some of the Alabama team, an Alabama team that went up there to Columbia, South Carolina, and they handled business, even in his later age. So everything that Steve Spurrier has done for the SEC. And number four, I have Kirby Smart in my Mount Rushmore already. I do think that the trajectory that he's on, what he's accomplished so far, and the only separation I had between him and Vince Dooley was the other national championship. Mm-hmm. And, the longevity does play a part into that as well. But I do think that Kirby Smart and everything that he's done, he's in the Mount Rushmore for me. So I have Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, and Kirby Smart as my Mount Rushmore.
All right, and then mine real quick: Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, and I went Vince Dooley, where Damian went Kirby Smart. So pretty similar there. A lot of you sitting yours in. You still have a little bit of time to do so. 205-834-9450, because when we return here on the other side, we're going to get to your list, your SEC head coach Mount Rushmore's. Put a bow on the show. Get your list on the GMC text line. That's coming up next here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5.
.646 here on Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order here with you for a few more moments as we continue to get your reaction to the SEC coaches Mount Rushmore. 205-834-9450. You continue with those text messages as well. Let me tell you about our friends at Blue Chew. It's an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, and Staxin in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets are a performance enhancement for the bedroom and can help men gain extra confidence when it's time to perform. Like I said, it's an online prescription service, so you don't have to worry about going to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy because it ships right to your door in discreet packaging. Let Blue Chew's licensed medical providers work with you to find the right ingredient and strength for your prescription. I can still hook you up for the free, y'all. Go to BlueChew.com and get your first month free when you use our promo code JOX. That's JOX at checkout. The only thing you have to pay for is $5 shipping. Go to BlueChew.com, promo code JOX to receive your first month free. And like I tell you, just chew it and do it.
All righty, well, y'all have been chiming in all morning long on the Courtesy GMC text line with your SEC coaches Mount Rushmores, and so that is where we go now to get your thoughts on who you think the greatest coaches are in the history of the Southeastern Conference. And our buddy Lewis, who chimes in first each and every morning, he goes, so he has his based on coaches he saw with his own eyes. So he goes Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, Lou Holtz, and Kirby Smart. Honorable mentions for him. He goes Bear Bryant. He says, I did see him, but I'm too young to remember going to the actual game. He also throws Pat Dye in there in the same category. And then he also adds the coach that I love the most, though, and I think we can all agree, Mike Leach.
Yes, sir.
And if you missed the news yesterday, very cool gesture, the College Football Hall of Fame. They lowered the so you have to have a 60% winning percentage or higher to be eligible as a head coach for the Hall of Fame. They lowered that total to 59.5% because that makes Mike Leach eligible. So he will now be in the Hall of Fame in 2027, I believe is when that will happen. But very cool gesture there yesterday for
yes, indeed,
the old Pirate. Let's see. Somebody chiming in. Hey, how about we do mascots? Okay, well, if y'all want to do mascots, maybe we'll do that. Someone else chimes in. He goes his Mount Rushmore, Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, and Kirby. All right. Can't hate that. Let's see. David and Pelham goes, he goes Suge Jordan, Pat Dye, Terry Bowden, Tommy Tuberville, Gene Chizik, Gus Malzahn, Brian Harsin, and Hugh Freeze.
I see where he's going.
Man, you really want some of the, you want Brian Harsin on there?
Yeah, of course. He took Alabama to 4 overtimes. But right. He lost.
Yeah, yes, he did. All right, Mike chimes in with his list. He goes Saban, Bear Bryant, Philip Fulmer, Steve Spurrier. Honorable mention for him goes to Urban Meyer. If we were doing a least likable coach, Urban Meyer would get my award.
What did Urban Meyer do to you, Conrad?
Don't like him. You like him?
I ain't got a problem with him.
I respect what he did as a football coach, but
Oh, yeah. That's all I keep.
I just have a lot of reasons to believe that maybe not the kind of person I would want to be around in my personal life.
Hey, he can coach ball.
He can coach ball. Mike from Hayden, he chimes in. He goes, Nick Saban, Vince Dooley, Steve Spurrier, Paul Bear Bryant. Same list that I had there, Mike. Very good. Let's see. Someone else goes, Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Wallace Wade, and Kirby Smart. Okay,
throwback.
Wallace Wade, that's a good one. Let's see. Thomas, he goes, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, Kirby Smart, Philip Fulmer. And then he goes, honorable mentions from before my time, Bear Bryant, Vince Dooley, and John Vaught.
Okay.
Very good. Gavin, he's going Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and the old ball coach, Mr. Steve Spurrier. Very good list there. Gavin, Jamari from Talladega, he's going Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Kirby Smart, and Steve Spurrier. Okay. A lot of people having Kirby's up in there. I'm not surprised by that. But a lot of people showing a lot of love to Kirby here. All right, Eric in Adamsville, he's going Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Darrell Royal, and Bud Wilkinson. So Darrell Royal, and yes, okay, I'll be honest. I did not consider Texas and Oklahoma coaches because they did this in the Big 12, so it's a little unfair to them.
Yeah.
But if we were to open it up, the Darrell Royals of the world, the Barry Switzers of the world, absolutely belong in that conversation. Darrell Royal won 3 titles at Texas in his day there. So that's where he goes. His honorable mention, Steve Spurrier, Kirby, Urban Meyer, and Lou Holtz. Cliff, he chimes in. He's going Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, and Shug Jordan. Honorable mentions for him, Pat Dye, Vince Dooley, and Coach Stallings.
Okay.
First shout-out for Coach Stallings. Won the 92 title there for Alabama. Fanboy, he chimes in. He goes Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Steve Spurrier, and Urban Meyer. And he says, just beating Nick Saban doesn't qualify you for a Mount Rushmore. You have to also win a national championship. Okay?
Okay.
What, are you
right?
Were you like debating between Gus Malzahn being on your list or Hugh Freeze or something? Or maybe it was Jimbo. Maybe that's who it was.
Who it was.
He was like, man, I really want to put Jimbo. Man, I hope somebody
Kevin Sumlin.
I hope some.
He was fighting it. He was trying to decipher which one.
Oh, I will die if somebody has Jimbo on their list. Which, to each their own, but that would certainly be interesting. We have somebody texting in from North Carolina. They're going Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, and Urban Meyer. Honorable mention, and there's somebody else that's mentioned this that we'll get to as well, but he goes honorable mention for him, Les Miles. Say what you want, but he won a title and played for another one.
True.
Didn't cross the 50-yard line in one of them.
Conrad, we don't bring that up.
Why not?
We're not discussing that. That was one time. That was one game.
Didn't cross the 50.
That was one game, Conrad.
Man, that was an awesome
It was
game.
still in the national championship.
That was such a great game. Anyways, moving forward. Drake, he chimes in, our resident Florida Gators fan. He goes Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, and Eddie Robinson. Okay.
Eddie,
Appreciate
he
the
didn't
list
coach in
there.
the SEC.
Let's see if he made a...
Because all he did, now he won the most at Grambling. Now he might have been like a coordinator or something in the SEC, but I thought all he did was
Yeah, no, he was just a Grambling.
right.
He was there for 56 years.
He was indeed.
Whew. Yeah, it's all right. Throw him on there. He's there for 56 years. Throw him on there. It's fine. All right, Don, he chimes in. He's going Bear Bryant, Steve Spurrier, Pat Dye, and Nick Saban. Honorable mentions for him, Vince Dooley, and Pete Carroll. That's another one. I'm like, I mean, obviously, we all think of USC when we think of Pete
Right,
Carroll.
yeah,
Did I miss somewhere along the way that he was... No, he was not in the SEC at any... Okay, he was a GA at Arkansas one year.
No.
So if we're counting that or not. But, I mean, hey, one of the greatest coaches, no doubt about it.
I'd play for him.
Yeah, in the Pac-12. All right, so we have, let's see... Luke, he just chimes in. He says, y'all could do a Mount Rushmore of the most memorable plays in SEC history. Oh, then we're going to have to talk about the kick six.
Yeah, because that'd be number one.
It would be number one. I can admit that. He says, mine would definitely be, my Mount Rushmore would be blocked by Mount Cody. Okay.
It's up there.
So not a Tennessee fan, I guess. Okay, somebody else chimes in from Texas. They go Shug Jordan, Steve Spurrier, Nick Saban, and Paul Bear Bryant for their list. Okay. Dexter chimes in. He says, good morning, guys. In order, my list would go 1 Nick Saban, 2 Bear Bryant, 3 Steve Spurrier, and 4 The Vaught. And then honorable mention for him, Urban Meyer and Pat Dye. Bama hater. Bam Hater goes, for his Mount Rushmore, he goes, all three of the Alabama coaches who have been named Mike, and then the Auburn coach that currently works in the government. He said honorable mention for him would be Nick Saban.
It's honorable mention.
Hey, I respect the dedication to being a hater, Bam Hater. Let's see. Someone chimes in. They show great show this morning, guys. My list would be Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, and Suge Jordan. Okay, another great list there. Jamie chimes in. He says, love both of your list. I would also give Gene Stallings an honorable mention on mine. Okay. Mount Rushmore from this person, Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Vince Dooley. Somebody I'm surprised we haven't heard until now, General Nealon.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great things
He
Tennessee.
He did.
Let's see. He says, fun fact about General Nealon, he went an entire season without being scored on and reeled off 17 straight shutouts at one point in his career.
That's gangster.
That's pretty good. Somebody chimes in. I love this. They say Les Miles was 103 and 29 coaching in the SEC. They then share their Mount Rushmore that does not have Les Miles on it. They say Nick Saban, Phil Fulmer, Bear Bryant, and Pat Dye. Oh, look, Les Miles was a good coach. He won a national championship. He liked to eat grass. He was entertaining.
He was.
It's just funny that you shared that and then didn't have
him on Mount Rushmore.
Let's see. Someone, Ballhead, chimes in. He says Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, Kirby Smart, Steve Spurrier. Honorable mentions Philip Fulmer and Mark Richt.
Oh, Marky Mark.
How about that? Someone says Mike Price, honorable mention maybe? No, not quite.
Nah.
Bo from Haleyville, Philip Fulmer, greatest snitch of all time. Okay. I wouldn't disagree with that one. Well, appreciate all of you chiming in. We'll figure something out to do on Monday with Mount Rushmore. McElroy and Kublik in the morning is next.